Ever since the early editions of Dungeons & Dragons, there's always been an alternative option to the fighter. No, I'm not talking about the barbarian, I'm talking about a fighter who's also a spellcaster. No, I'm not talking about the ranger either. I mean a fighter who's a bit more diverse in their options. No, not the rogue either. Paladins. I'm talking about paladins. Howdy. My name is Nonat, and on this edition of D&D vs. Pathfinder, we are comparing the tried and true Paladin to Pathfinder's somewhat shift to form with their iteration of the Champion. But honestly, I've never played a Paladin or a Champion, so I'm gonna need the help of someone with a bit more experience. Josh?
Thanks, Nonat. Paladins have always been my favorite class to play in TTRPGs, so I'm really excited to get into this.
But before we get right into it, I would like to ask for a minute of your time as I tell you about Sinclair's library. And before you skip ahead, I have some new pertinent information. I know I've been talking about it a lot the last few weeks, but that's because the Kickstarter has been going all month. And now we are officially 1 week away from the end of the Kickstarter. If you're going to pledge, do it now before you forget and the campaign ends, because just so you know, prices are going to increase. Namely, our PDFs and hardcovers are both going to get more expensive. The hardcovers specifically, which are selling for $40 right now on the Kickstarter pledge, are going up to retail price of $60 once the campaign is over. So if you want to get them at a really big discount, now is the time. Don't forget that we have access to nearly worldwide shipping now to save you shipping prices, so they're not all coming from the USA. So if you want to pledge and help us crush some stretch goals and get your hands on a quality product in a few months, few being like 6+, go ahead and click the link at the top of the description to pledge to the Sinclair's Library Kickstarter and order it in either D&D 5e or Pathfinder 2e, whichever system you prefer. We promise you will not be disappointed. Anyway, just wanted to drop that last little reminder for you. Let's talk champions. Now, as usual with these D&D vs. Pathfinder videos, this is not going to be which one is better. Rather, this is going to be me and Josh breaking the classes down, talking about the pros, talking about the cons, and letting you decide which version you prefer in the comments below. This is an invitation to converse with your fellow commenters, not yell at them. So please, civil discussion only. Thank you. No holy flame wars, please. Now, how are we going to handle the class in this video, Josh?
We'll break them down into the 4 gospels of game design: simplicity, flavor, efficiency, and balance. We'll see what each system does better and which one does less gooder.
Let's start off with the simplicity of D&D 5e, and wow! In the last video, I thought the monk was bad, but by level 7, the paladin still has 11 unique features, almost as many as the monk. But they get almost all of these by level 3. Divine Sense, Lay on Hands, a fighting style, their subclass, their spellcasting, Divine Smite, Divine Health, all at level 3. So even if you're a new player starting a campaign at level 3, you need to understand each of these unique features before you can even play your character. This isn't to touch the fact that smites work a little differently, because you can cast them when you land a hit and not before attacking, and that their spellcaster spell list changes completely depending on their subclass. Simply put, Paladins are not designed for new players, as they are both a fighter and a spellcaster at the exact same time.
That said, once you get it, playing a paladin becomes fairly straightforward. Some skills in life are easy to learn, but hard to master. Playing a 5e paladin is hard to learn, but easy to master. Once you get past that initial gate, it's smooth sailing.
Pathfinder 2e is unfortunately not much better in the simplicity department. Just at level 1, champions have a unique reaction, which is based on their deity and cause they've selected, as well as a deific weapon based on that deity, a code which is separate from that cause, devotion spells, which is their own unique form of spellcasting, and shield block. Even compared to other classes in Pathfinder 2e, this is a ton to choose from.
But like the monk, the champion is as complicated as you choose to make it. You can choose from the beginning if you want to focus on passive auras, beefing up your lay on hands, or becoming more efficient with your attacks with oaths, or getting better at your focus spells. The champion in Pathfinder tends to look fairly complicated, but in practice, it's actually pretty simple and reliable at lower levels. In the end, both are relatively complicated on the surface, but simpler than they appear in actual gameplay. They have a lot of passive features going on in the background, but their options in a combat situation, aside from their spells, aren't too numerous.
The Paladin has had a really interesting history. Way back in older editions of D&D, the Paladin was actually sort of a prestige class of fighter, but as the years went on, the designers figured there was so much to this thing of a Paladin that it deserved to be its own primary class. The one thing that held it back, however, was a severe limitation. When the Paladin originally came out, they could only be lawful good. No other alignment was allowed. And while for some people this was incredibly fun, as there was a clear path that your roleplay could take, for others it was incredibly limiting. I won't deny it, the lawful good path of the Paladin was a really easy first roleplay for a new player, also due in no small part to the fact that if you go against this lawful good code, you lose all of your Paladin powers.
Now, while you can be lawful good and still be an interesting character, it limits a lot of potential design space and roleplay potential if characters are restricted to that single alignment. Luckily, both D&D 5th edition and Pathfinder 2nd edition have presented different solutions to this issue. D&D 5e's solution is honestly genius. Instead of adhering to the code of the alignment system, you adhere to the code of an oath. You can be any alignment you wish as a paladin, and you'll still have that risk of losing your power if you break your oath's code. You can actually make a chaotic neutral paladin and give them vengeance or oathbreaker, and it won't create ludonarrative dissonance. And these oaths have a lot of room for reflavoring, like an acceptance speech, a ritual, or XP to level 3 suggested your oath being like a wedding vow.
Now, there's a weird issue with the Paladin Oath feature in that it doesn't really kick in until level 3, which I've always found to be a bit odd. Now, in the flavor text, it does say you should plan ahead for your champion's beliefs to line up with their eventual oath, but this just keeps leaning into the fact that D&D 5e doesn't really start until level 3. In terms of features, you get some pretty typical Paladin stuff that gets stronger as you level up, such as Aura of Protection. You also get a limited number of spell slots to fill with your specific spellcaster's spell list, try saying that 5 times fast, and your choice of spells can absolutely flesh out who your Paladin is. Are you more utility, taking more healing spells and support spells, or maybe you're taking some spells that augment your ability to roleplay, or maybe you're just not caring what spells you take because you're going to use them all for Divine Smite anyway. And I'm not talking about the Smite Paladin spells. Those are separate from Divine Smite, and that's a whole awkward design choice that I'll be getting into later.
Pathfinder 2e's champions follow a similar yet distinct system for informing roleplay by way of tenets and causes. Your tenets are where you land on the good versus evil scale, and your cause is law versus chaos. Depending on your alignment, and by extension your subclass, you'll gain a different reaction. Since the initial release of Pathfinder 2nd edition, there have been several different causes you can follow that allow for flavor. But again, we're only going with basic options here. In the core rulebook of Pathfinder 2nd edition, a champion can only be lawful, neutral, or chaotic good. It's better than the previous editions, don't get us wrong, but still pretty limited compared to 5e. That being said, 2e does offer other flavorful options in its class feats. They have their own versions of oaths that offer benefits when facing certain types of creatures like fiends or dragons. Their feats also often affect lay on hands, allowing it to remove certain conditions like frightened or enfeebled. The oath feats especially are incredibly flavorful, but their usefulness heavily relies on what kind of campaign you're in. If you take the Dragon Slayer oath, but you never fight a single dragon, that feat ain't gonna help you whatsoever. It's become common courtesy for a GM to let you know if there will actually be any of that specific enemy in the campaign before a champion commits to one of these feats.
At level 3, you get the Divine Ally feature, allowing you to make your weapon, your shield, or a mounted animal companion your Divine Ally. This is a really cool piece of flavor that I love that they added to the champion class. Additionally, your choice of deity will open a wide variety of different focus spells, or devotion spells as they're called for champions, as your deity's domains determine which spells are available to your champion. And if you still like auras like D&D 5e, there are auras for you to pick up in the champion's feat selection. So while the alignment of champions is restricted to good in the core rulebook of Pathfinder 2e, there's a ton of options to let you flavor that type of good. Overall, D&D allows more wiggle room for what the character is, while Pathfinder offers more choices on what the character does. D&D gives more freedom for roleplay, Pathfinder gives more freedom for mechanics.
Now, efficiency. Is it fun? Is it impactful? Paladins have long filled the role of frontline fighter and defender with some holy spellcasting on the side for some versatility and unique flavor. Unlike the cleric, which usually hangs out in the back to keep those fighters hale and hearty, the paladins typically do that from the front line. 5e paladins from the very beginning are incredibly versatile and efficient since they are partial spellcasters. Yes, spellcasting is by its very nature complicated, but paladins don't have a bazillion spells they need to keep track of compared to sorcerers or wizards. But by far, the best thing about being a paladin in 5e is the smite! It is such a joy to land a hit on a creature and then just shout, "I smite them!" and roll more d6s. Full Deus Vult energy, and I love it.
Josh isn't really overreacting. This Paladin Divine Smite is incredibly powerful. And I also mentioned earlier that there are spells that are types of smites similar. But like I said earlier, the Divine Smite will almost always be the more powerful choice. I'll touch on this more in the balance section, but once you get the level 2 class feature Divine Smite, your spell slots might as well just be considered smite slots. Not only are they incredibly powerful, but they're some of the most efficient options in the game because you don't have to use the resource until you've confirmed a hit. The only potential aspects I could think of that will bog down combat as a paladin in 5e is really just remembering your auras and different bonuses you might be getting from class features. Also your channel divinity options, which depending on your subclass have varying usability and complexity. Weirdly enough, in the mid to high levels, paladins don't really get a whole lot of impactful features. Now I wouldn't call any of them useless, they're just not as game-changing as something like Divine Smite. Your auras, your cleansing touch, and some of your spell slots are not bad features in any way, but as a paladin it's easy to feel like you peaked early, which can lead to some really interesting character creation options. Josh, you know what I'm talking about.
2e champions naturally nudge players towards a more tanky style of play. The reactions in combat allow them to save allies and themselves. Lay on hands can protect allies and themselves. If you like playing a tank in an MMO, well then you're great. If not, well, you still got some good options for damage. Divine Ally at level 3 gives you some attack room depending on the trait you select. Though once you get your Divine Smite at level 7, you feel like you can contribute a little bit more damage. Though it typically results in bonus damage equal to your charisma modifier, it somewhat captures that feeling of through devotion and faithfulness they get more and more powerful. They could possibly just use a little bit more power from that feature. So at early levels, you feel a lot more impactful as a paladin in D&D 5th edition. But in later levels, 2A champions definitely feel more consistent and efficient. 5e is a firework, 2e is a slower burn.
Since their inceptions, paladins have been the quintessential man on the front lines, not only good at keeping themselves alive, but also their allies. They're reliable in a pinch, so rather than judge the class based on how much damage it can or can't do, we're more so looking at the paladin and champion in terms of how they can control and change the tide of battle, whether it's by becoming an impassable wall, keeping their allies alive, or becoming an unstoppable force of divine wrath.
Let's not beat around the bush. 5e paladins are the most durable, survivable, and self-sufficient class in the game. They're invaluable to any team. They get full training in armor and weapons and are granted healing magic at level 1. At level 2, they get spellcasting and a fighting style. If the healer needs a boost, lay on hands or healing spells can support them. And if you need extra damage, boom, Divine Smite. There's no way around it. Paladins and 5e are very powerful in the early levels. However, it does fall off a little in the mid-game, and you don't really get anything stupid powerful until level 20, which very few campaigns actually get to do. But if you do, oh boy.
Josh, you're forgetting something. Something dark. Something terrible.
They can cast Revivify?
Divine Smite. An innocuous enough ability. Feels great on a paladin. When you hit an enemy, you can sacrifice a spell slot to deal 2d6 extra radiant damage. Sounds fair enough. After all, paladins are incredibly limited on their number of spell slots. Even at level 10, they only get 9 per day.
Where'd your saturation go?
But what if I told you the strongest way to play a paladin was to stop at level 2 and start taking points in another class? See, the wording on Divine Smite's pretty clear. It just says, expend a spell slot. Doesn't say paladin spell slot. So if you, take 3 levels of sorcerer, you'll have yourself 8 spell slots per day, almost as many as a level 11 paladin. And if you put in 9 levels of sorcerer, suddenly you're only level 11, and you've got more spell slots than a max level 20 paladin. And every single one of those spell slots can be sacrificed to add 2d8, 3d8, 4d8 extra radiant damage to every single attack you hit. And since you can use it before rolling damage, but after confirming a hit, you ain't gonna miss one of those Divine Smites!
Can we talk about the champion now? 2e champions keep the flavor of being very hard to put down. Champions are the only class in the game that get legendary proficiency in all armors. You get some decent damaging options, but you're not primarily a damaging class. But in terms of being able to just live, champions are uncontested. Though that is where their advantages end. Their accuracy is the same as most other martials, but they get far fewer options to increase their damage. There's honestly not that much more to say regarding the champion. They're honestly an incredibly well-balanced class within the context of the system. A tiny sacrifice to damage is really worth it considering all the defense you get in exchange. So the 2e champion is the hard-to-kill guy that focuses more on control. And the 5e paladin is the hard-to-kill guy that focuses more on damage. But keep in mind, both sides can kinda dip into each other.
Overall, they're both fantastic classes. If you're looking for a mechanical representation of a holy warrior dedicated to serving a higher power, you can't go wrong either way. They're both just different means to the same end. But if you want to play a death machine who only expends their resources on a successful hit to deal ludicrous amounts of bonus damage, then play a paladin, multi-classed into sorcerer, and use Divine Smite every single turn if you hit.
Who hurt you?
A paladin killed my BBEG in 2 turns.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Thank you all so much for watching, and don't forget to let us know in the comments whether you prefer the D&D Paladin or the Pathfinder Champion. I think this is the most wildly different 2 iterations of a class we've compared so far. Big shout out to Josh Scorcher for helping me out with this video. There is a link in the description to both his channel, so you can go subscribe, and to a video that I did with him on his channel listing the top 10 most depressing games ever. Or if you want to see a game that Josh is GMing and I am currently guest starring on, click the link to check out the Shadows of the Old World. It's a huge campaign if you're looking for something to binge, or if you just want to watch the episodes with me in them, they should be the most recent episodes right now. Check them out in the description. I want to give a huge shout out to my patrons for helping me in everything that I do. Y'all are the real MVPs and the real ones keeping the channel alive. And I want to give a huge shout out to Sinclair's Library. Again, there's only 7 days left of the campaign. If you don't pledge within those 7 days, prices are going up. So pledge while you can before you have to pay like 50% extra. That's all for me. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And until next time, no nat ones. I don't know what this was. Why did I do finger guns? This isn't even a gunslinger video. Cut the video!